Hey there, Naomi. It's Julia, the ex-English major, and in today's video, I'm back on my happy couch, the couch that I like to film on when I read a book that was an absolute unexpected delight and have to come on up here and film a quick video for you just to share my love of the book. The book that I have here that I finished the other day and have absolutely not been able to stop thinking about is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. As you may know, I have been reading Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey lately. Actually, if we're going with the real flow of time, I'm going to film that video in a few days from now. Northanger Abbey is my absolute favorite Jane Austen. It's my absolute favorite satire. I love it, love it, love it. And so when I finished, I was still kind of in a Regency vibe. And so I had seen Half a Soul mentioned briefly by a couple other creators. I will put their handles up here on the screen. This is something that has been on my TBR for a while, and it's kind of a Regency style story, and so decided to pick it up since I wasn't ready to be done living in kind of a Jane Austen-y world. And oh my goodness, I absolutely loved this book. This book is just a great whimsical time. It is kind of set in a world where fairies exist, so fairy London in Regency time. I absolutely loved it. If you have not picked up Half a Soul, please do. And the purpose of this video is going to be to convince you that this should be your next read, especially if you like Regency style books and you're looking for a fun, whimsical time. This is not a perfect book by any stretch of the imagination. There are some elements that I'll get into that kind of make it a little bit of a brain off type book. So you're not going to be reading this necessarily for like great scholarly learning, but I thought that this story was absolutely captivating. I thought it was a great time, and so if you are interested in kind of a Jane Austen Regency style book, then genuinely you need to pick this book up. I was kicking my feet and giggling the whole way through. I had an absolute blast. So I'll go ahead and read the summary here in case this is a book that you have not heard of. It is kind of on internet circles. It's something that I'd heard before, but I don't think it's gotten a huge amount of buzz, and I want this book to get more buzz than I've seen because I kind of put this on my shelf as on a whim. I'm kind of kicking myself that I didn't read this earlier, and I'm so glad that I did. Ever since she was cursed by a fairy, Theodora Eddings has no sense of fear or embarrassment, an unfortunate condition that leaves her prone to accidental scandal. Dora hopes to be a quiet, sensible wallflower during the London season, but when Elias Wilder, the handsome, peculiar, and utterly ill-mannered Lord Sorcier, discovers her condition, she is instead drawn into dangerous fairy affairs. If her reputation can survive both her curse and her sudden connection with the least liked man in all of high society, then she and her family may yet reclaim their normal place in the world. But the longer Dora spends with Elias, the more she begins to suspect that one may indeed fall in love, even with only half a soul. This story is a Regency romance story full of just whimsy and magic and fairy creatures, fairy bargains, and I absolutely loved it. So for the strengths of this story, without getting into too many spoilers here, first, the characters were absolutely amazing. I thought that they were all really well done. So our two lead characters here, we have a female main character named Theodora, who she goes by Dora, and she is someone who, prior to the beginning of this book, in the prologue here, she had her mother sell her to a fairy. Her mother had bargained that her firstborn would have her soul given to a fairy creature. And so when the fairy comes to collect, he cuts half her soul away. He is going to take the full soul, but Theodora's cousin, who is her best friend, her closest confidant, she scares the fairy off with these iron scissors. And so the fairy kind of just takes half of Theodora's soul and leaves the other half behind. And this makes Theodora, who she goes by Dora, makes her very peculiar. She is able to feel what she calls long-tailed emotions, where things that kind of take place over a long period of time, things like dread, she is able to feel, but she can't quite get in touch with what she calls short-tailed emotions, things in the moment. So that in the moment fear, in the moment anxiety, she can't feel those feelings. She is very much like not neurotypical, neurospicy, neurodivergent coded. She is somebody who she doesn't quite pick up on social cues. She can ration that she should be feeling some emotions, and so she can kind of mask in society, quote unquote, a normal person would be feeling X in this scenario and they would behave Y. And so she will go ahead and kind of go through the motions of that expected Y behavior without ever having it connect her. And so it takes a lot of conscious effort for her. And so because of that, it's hard for her to form close attachments. She's always overthinking herself. She feels comfortable behaving the way that she wants to in front of her cousin, but in front of the broader world, so to speak, she is constantly thinking about what should be the correct way to behave. And so that takes up a lot of her mental capacities. And I thought that she was really, really well written. As someone who personally, I am not necessarily neurodivergent, but the close people in my life are. And so I really, really loved how Theodora was portrayed because I feel like we don't see that very often. I thought it was really refreshing. I thought it was great. We're in her head. We're following her and she is so believable. This isn't something that's necessarily wrong with her. It's just how she goes through the world and how she learns to kind of be accepted throughout this story. And then also the male main character, this Elias Wilder, the Lord Sorcier, he absolutely had me kicking my feet, having a great old time. He is someone who he is very angry at a lot of things that he sees in society. He is someone who is very new to lordship. He is a magician who, due to his efforts in the Napoleonic Wars, he is promoted to kind of the main sorcerer for the king and granted a lordship. And so as someone who grew up in workhouses and was very much out of high society and then is now dealing with this new lordship, this new title, he's seeing all the injustices in the world and he's really angry about how proper society behaves, and he is a little bit on the outskirts. He's a little bit gruff, but one of the things that I love about his character is we get to see not just anger and not just brooding as like the only two emotions that it seems like men in society and also men in romance books like this, they're very buttoned up and the only emotion that they're allowed to have is anger, and the only emotion that they're allowed to show is being this like gruff, brooding, angry, powerful type man. And what I really love in this book is we have this man who he sees the injustices of the world, and not only is he just angry, but he shows grief. He shows a wide variety of emotions. He's kind of a bit of a foil, a little bit to our main female character, who she is not in touch with her emotions necessarily, or those in the moment emotions. And Elias very much is. He gets angry. He will cry on page. He expresses joy. And so it's really refreshing to kind of see a character like that in a story, especially because I think in a lot of our romance type novels, whether they're PG like this one or more of a spicier romance novel that is a little bit more of a smut novel, which this book is not, but in both of them, I'm seeing a lot of these male main characters who are just gruff and brooding and angry, and he starts out that way, but as we get to know him, and as he gets more page time, he is given a wide a range of emotions, and I really like seeing a character on the page, especially a male character on the page, who is somebody like that, who is given a wide array of emotions, because I think in a lot of stories, the male main characters seem to be a little bit of a copy paste cutout, where it's the kind of brooding, dark-haired, hot guy who is not really have any other impact on the story, and they all seem like they could kind of be interchangeable. I know that that does it for some people. There's a reason that that kind of character is what is so prominent, but I really like how he has that. Not only that, I just like getting to see a powerful magician who is like a very much a leftist king here, who he's sitting here and he is seeing the social injustices and calling them out. Outside of the characters, from a writing standpoint, this book was also fantastic. I really, really liked how it was portrayed. It is very much a whimsical type story. We have a lot of whimsical descriptions, and even the first line. So we open up our prologue with Theodora Eloisa Charity Eddings was a very long name for a very small girl. This, her aunt liked to say, was probably why she was such a handful. By the time one had fully shouted the words, Theodora Eloisa Charity Eddings, you get back here this instant, said 10-year-old girl was almost always long gone. So I just think that the writing style is very, very beautiful. It's very reminiscent of a Jane Austen writing style as well. We're opening up kind of with our narrator talking about the characters. And so I thought that the whimsy and the writing here was absolutely beautiful. It is written with kind of modern day language, but it is still, the word choices were it seemed extremely well thought out. I was just absolutely captivated by the words that were used to tell the story. And so that kind of propelled me into the magic of the broader story. So I was a really big fan of just the writing style in here. Another piece that is very similar to Jane Austen, besides the writing style updated for a modern day and it being a Regency time period, is we are seeing a very prominent character arcs throughout this story, which I feel like in some books today is lacking, and this book does it extremely well. Of as the story progresses, as things happen to the characters in the story, we start to see some of the characters in a different light. And this goes beyond just our main characters, but into some of our secondary and tertiary characters as well. I feel like, just like in Jane Austen's story, a lot of our characters go through a story arc, or our main characters view other characters in new lights as the story progresses. And that kind of adds to this sort of teaching of a lesson for our main characters. And as the story goes on, things are happening both externally and internally with the characters. I thought that lent a lot of depth to the story, and it made the plot more believable. Even though this is a whimsical tale with fairies and bargains and, cutting away half of souls, I thought that it made the story more believable. And sometimes in a lot of books that I find lately, especially a lot of like romance novels, sometimes the focus is mostly on the romance and not on the broader plot. And so sometimes it seems like things happen without there being a reason. And though this is a romance book, there is a lot happening in the plot, and the things that happen in the plot have consequences on not just our main characters and their inner worlds, but our secondary, tertiary characters and their inner worlds. And so I thought that that was really well done, and something that I think some modern day books are lacking. One of the weaknesses of this is, like I alluded to before, parts of this are a bit of a quote unquote brain off book. Some of this is something that you are reading for the vibes, for the swoon worthy romance tale. It's PG, so they just kiss. However, one of the weaknesses in here is there are some political points that are brought up without really being dug into. I think that that is probably a conscious choice by the author, because it is such a whimsical, magical fairy tale. Some of the broader, deeper politics around the labor conditions in the workhouses and some of those political activist things that our male main character is such a proponent for, or things like the horrors of war. It's referenced here without really giving it a lot of detailed depth. In my copy, there is a novella that's attached just all about our Lord Sorcier character. It's called The Lord Sorcier. So it's all about Elias and Albert and their time in the Napoleonic Wars. And that novella goes a little bit more in depth toward some of those things happening in the background of the Regency time period. However, in our main story here, some of his political points are brought up and then not really dug into. So this isn't something that you're going to want to read for necessarily the politics, for some of the historical events that were so atrocious back in that time period. And they're more referenced just as a bit of a backing for our main character to explain why he is the way he is. And I felt like that was a weakness. When I read a story, I do kind of want to have those pieces in there. I don't really like when politics are brought up as a prop. And I can see why it was omitted, because that takes away from the hee hee ha ha fun time that we're seeing if we get too in depth around the labor conditions in the workhouses, or the disfiguration of these men in the Napoleonic Wars and the big effect of that, or kind of the in-depth look at seeing the French as the enemy. They're touched on very briefly. I just could have done with some more of those backings with a purpose to it beyond just, oh, our main character is hot and he cares about social issues. If he is going to be recognizing the suffering, it would have been nice to have more in depth. And they do go more in depth in the novella at the end, but even still, I would have liked it to have been more of a plot point instead of a prop to make our hot guy more attractive. Then again, that's just me, and it also aligns with my own politics, so I'm just biased here and wanting to see more of things that I believe in represented in my media. On the whole, I really, really liked this book. It is absolutely a great, like, book candy type thing if you are someone who wants to get into a good Regency style romance. Maybe you've read a lot of Jane Austen, maybe you just finished watching Bridgerton, and you kind of want some of those vibes there, then this is going to be absolutely a great one for you. It is a series. There are interconnected standalones. I will probably end up picking up books 2 or books 3 at some point, because I absolutely loved this, but it is book candy, and so it is something that I probably won't jump into immediately, but save it for a rainy day. Heaven forbid a girl have a good time, and I think that it's really helpful to have a wide array of things on your shelves, to where it's totally fine, in my opinion, maybe because I feel this, I do this, so I'm just justifying my own actions on the camera, but I think that it's perfectly fine to let people enjoy books that they want to enjoy your little fairy smut, enjoy your little romance novels, but also it's helpful to have a wide array on your shelf, to be reading a wide array of things and not to just pigeonhole yourself into one style of book. If you are in search of a good, fun, PG romance story set in Regency time period with a lot of whimsy and magic and kind of fairy tale references, then I would highly recommend Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. I was a big fan. Thank you so much for spending time with me. Would highly recommend